Welcome to Alexandrians with Diane Karim, where I interview authors, both living and dead ones. Today's guest is, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, David Dobrovitsky. Dobrovitsky?
Dobrovitsky.
Almost. He's the CEO of WowDuck, the marketing arm of Cicada Capital. Previously served as CEO and CEO of FunToken.io, the largest iGaming project in Web3, and was the founder and CEO of and CMO of Glitter Finance, a DeFi infrastructure setup. A true legend in the game. I'm honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Germans are not very famous for the beauty in how our words sound, but I'm still trying to make it through the podcast with a very limited amount of vocabulary I have. Since I've misspoken your name, what is the meaning of it? One of the things we connected over was I saw a post of you on LinkedIn about the future of money. And I had this vision of that maybe we are heading towards an entity economy where our likeness earns on our behalf, maybe in the future, and that my project can contribute something to this. But your name reminds me of the famous Russian novelist that I admire very much. So what is the meaning of your name and what's the story behind it?
Well, I mean, one of my grandfathers was from Poland, and others were from Ukraine, and eventually somehow they all ended up in Russia. So it's definitely a Slavic last name, perhaps with some Polish origin, maybe. Um, the meaning in the modern Russian, dobro means kind, and then in the ancient Slavic languages, it means oak.
Oh,
so so it's like oaken, so it's in the Hobbit you have Oakenshield, you know what I mean?
yes.
This is literally the name. I know for a fact that when I was driving through the Balkans and I was driving through, let's say, through Slovenia, they have entire villages called like Dobrovka, for example. Quite possible that my ancestors came from there. But yeah, I've always suspected that the name probably started around in the Balkans and the Slavic regions, and probably my ancestors just migrated into Russia, and so that kind of, you know, mix, if you will.
What would you say was one of the earliest moments where your entrepreneurial DNA manifested itself? Because I'm learning a lot from your authoring, and I'm always interested where I see human beings almost as libraries. I'm always interested, like, where was the first book written, and what was one of the first indicators that you were evolving in the way you did.
Well, so I was always very interested in business, to be honest. My grandfather was pretty big in business. The earliest was probably, growing up in the States, I at some point started to look into selling insurance when I was very young. Let me give you the whole story, though. I started as a musician, as a classical violinist from the age of 5 to my mid-20s. I was like very close to a prodigy, very well known in the industry. But I had a very deep interest in business as well. And it started to manifest in my mid-20s, around 22 years old. And so, yeah, I started to try to sell insurance just to try to kind of think about how to be an entrepreneur and make some money for myself, and kind of natural progression, really. And then, um, yeah, and then eventually I went to a conservatory, which is a fancy name for a musical college called Eastman School of Music, and they had a great program called the Arts Leadership Program, which was really a business and marketing minor in disguise. It was all these different subjects. They were very aware. It was 2008 that the music industry had crashed due to the crash in the financial scene. Orchestras were closing down, and they were very forward looking with it. They realized that you can't just teach somebody how to play an instrument and then tell them good luck, kid. And so they were teaching things like press releases, building websites, very practical stuff. And so from there, the combination of me having tried to be kind of in business before and selling from an early age, and then going to a university where they were really kind of propagating that vision that you have to create your own career, you have to sell yourself in essence, you have to create your brand. That all basically continued to push me towards business. Besides that, I when I was younger, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Kiyosaki. I really enjoyed it. The mentality of how to think poor and how people think rich, and how people think about making money. And I think that all of those three kind of, in some ways, disparate things really kind of got me started.
Violinist. What comes to mind when you think of your chapter as a musician? It's like one of the very books that sparked me having this podcast was a book by Laszlo Polgar. Not sure if you know the guy, but he wrote a book, Bring Up Genius, and he was a crazy psychologist, pedagogue, is really in the most beautiful sense, at least to me, where he was very inspired, like what prodigies have in common among themselves, and he
Mm.
had this idea that geniuses are not born but raised, so to say. And to test his theory, he went through thousands of biographies of prodigies of the past and tried to find commonalities. And one of the things he found was early childhood specialization. So what he did, as all crazy scientists do, he ran a crazy experiment and find a wife on, I think it was in a newspaper, like her name was Clara, and they tried to test the thesis with chess, because chess has like elo points. So they redesigned their entire environment, would put chess posters anywhere, had three children on purpose, and he documented the entire journey of then trying to turn them into chess prodigies. And by the time they were 10, I think they were, or like 10 to 14, they were all world class chess players who even were beating some grandmasters. And I was always very interested in the idea of like how the best of us, how their education is almost antithetical to what you receive in public education, which is a very generous approach. So if you would teach us a little bit about that early chapter where you became a musician, what was this like? How did you learn? How did you learn this, and what did you took away from it?
Well, I was a very musical, it was pretty apparent when I was little. My mom had tried to be a classical pianist and failed. And growing up in the Soviet Union at the time, because the first 9 years of my life were spent growing up in what was Soviet Union and then became the Russian Federation eventually. I was just from the kind of family where my mom really wanted me to go into music. It was just one of those things. Kid is musical, it's prestigious. And so that's basically how I started with music. I was given a choice. Do you want piano, violin, guitar, whatever? And I somehow chose the violin. I was, I guess, attracted to the violin sound. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was really just a combination of my parents' background, with the fact that I had some talent. That's all. What I would criticize in this approach, though, is that having talent in something and having a love of something are completely different things. As an entrepreneur, you find out that the only way to be successful in something is when you have a really deep passion for it. Like you enjoy doing what you do. For example, I enjoy business. I enjoy tech. That's why I write so much about tech, because I actually like it. For me, it's not even work. It's just I go sit down. I'm a good writer, and I just put down some thoughts, and that's it. Or sometimes I do research. I write articles on Substack, and sometimes I break down certain technologies. And to be honest with you, I don't even do it for the audience. I mostly do it just for my own curiosity. I like doing research where I start to understand the technology. And I post it, and some people, and quite often it's very popular for the simple reason that I put energy into it, the kind of energy where it says, this is fun. This is interesting. I like doing this. Maybe you like it too. And I think that is the basis of pretty much all successful business. You have to base it all on positive emotions. And so when you start to train people, from their birth, in a sense, depriving them of a chance, a real mature chance, or to choose something in a mature way, right? Because 3-year-old can't really choose, 5-year-old can't really choose, 6-year-old can't really choose. By the time you get to around 12, you can. Your mind is starting to be formed. And so if you don't allow kids to do that, that has the effect potentially of stagnating their emotional development, you know, and creating issues that they will then have to resolve later on in life. Whereas if you allow them to truly just develop and you tell them, kid, you're empowered. What do you like? What does your nature call to you? You know, then you really give them a shot to really enjoy something, not resent it, and grow with it. And so, yeah, I think that that's kind of where I disagree with how the culture in which I was brought up treated talent, if you will.
What does your nature call to you? This is such a profound question, I feel. And it's like many geniuses are also created accidentally in a way where the parents, for instance, already accumulated a certain talent or genius in their craft. And so they're utilizing this in order to form their children into becoming a successor to this particular empire. Do you think this is the wrong approach to go about
Yeah.
education?
It's a terrible approach. It's a horrific approach. It's a throwback to 19th century, 18th century, and all the centuries. Your father did something, therefore you must do something. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Every person is independent. They have their own nature. They have their own slight differences in DNA, and their spirit calls for something else. And if a child isn't allowed to explore what the spirit calls for, all you're doing is you're suppressing the child, and you are basically kind of just pushing your ideology onto them. That's all there is. That's all it is. And you're not allowing the child to have the ability to make a sovereign choice and take credit for it. You know what I mean? And so, the only way you can truly have, and this is my opinion, and I say this as an educator. I used to be a violin teacher, music teacher, theory teacher. I would go to inner city schools in Baltimore with my wife, would teach music. So I can say this as an educator, not just as an entrepreneur now. Although I also now mentor people, from time to time. But in my opinion, like you have to give the kiddo the ability to make a choice and feel good about that choice and teach them that feeling good is how you give back for that choice, you know and if you do that, then you're giving the person the ability to find their specialness. I recently wrote an essay about this on my Substack, and I quoted Joseph Campbell, who used to say, you need to follow your bliss. And what he meant is exactly this: what makes you happy? What makes you soul sing? If what makes you happy is making memes, then by all means just do it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I go in Quora, and I also participate in Quora, and I write some things there. And I recently read something that a mother wrote, and it was one of the worst things I've ever read. She said, my son has 12 million followers on TikTok. How do I tell him that this is not a viable career option and cut it off without him hating me? You can't. He will hate you. Even posting that on Quora is cringe. It's an embarrassment, you know. So this is how it is. There's no easy way of putting it. The traditional education system is geared towards suppression of the child. That's why the world is in the state that it is, because there's too many suppressed people who are very angry and very resentful. That's all it is. And there's too many people that have very rarely taken ownership of their own choices, because that's not what was that's not what was propagated in culture. And so many people never take that leap. Once it's knocked out of them very early, when they're children, when they go to school, they never go back to it, you know? So I realize that this may diverge with some other opinions, but truly, as an educator of many years, this is what I've come to believe.
One of my favorite quotes, David, is from Socrates. It's like the purpose of education is to kindle a fire, not to fill a vessel, pretty much.
Yeah.
And one of the strange thing that I learned when I was a counselor, I wrote many books about behavior psychology, and I would for sometimes help people to find out what they should do with their life. And they often ask me, and one of the things that was very surprising for me was that I could never give this answer to them, but we kind of conspired on consulting their conscience on, as what you put it, life is expecting out of them in congruence with their personal talent, and that whenever you were imposing something, that they had like almost like physical symptoms to reacting towards this. So my question would be, what would a Socratic educational approach look like for the generation where we are? Because right now it's like I suffered, for instance, very much from it. I got kicked out from school when I was 16 years old, and it was particularly because I'm interested in psychology. I love psychology so much. Even like this podcast is a psychological research project to me always. So how do successful people think and became the person that they are today? But I had to do math and geography and lots of stuff where I just looking at the numbers, I'm like not a very technical person. It was miserable for me. And while I understand a certain level of literacy in these kind of things could be useful, measuring my talent based on the metrics where my nature is not in a harmony with, like, I suffered very much from, and I got kicked out of the system because of it. Like, what do you think is the platonic ideal for how this could evolve into the future of how we take care of the next generation?
Well, I mean, look, I was in the same boat. I was in this American regular schooling system, and the only subjects I was ever interested in was literally history, geography, and maybe some like literature. I love literature. That's all. You put me in a math class, I zone out, turn off, and I ended up just cheating through math because I just hated it so much. And it's just like I'm a very spiteful, resentful person. You put me in a situation I don't like, you know, I'm going to cause a lot of problems. Uh, and so, the teachers would just go after me constantly because I was copying somebody else, making deals in the background to get their, answers. So yeah, I would say that the best way to educate is a child. I like the Montessori approach to some extent, although I feel like it's not great across the board because sometimes you find schools where the teachers are maybe more harsh than they should be. Um, but beyond the Montessori approach, the child should be allowed to live, interact, and be interacted with in a kind, loving, and respectful way. And in that background, where the child is interacted with in that way, in a kind, loving, and respectful way, never looking down at a child, never thinking that you know better than the child because you're older, that child will start to show you where they want to go, what is special to them. Um, so for example, like, if I had been raised in that way, let's say my parents would have seen that I self-educate. I like to read the dictionary. I like to read the encyclopedia. I literally do. I'm a researcher at heart. I just can't help myself. I need to learn something constantly. And they would have seen that I like to learn about history a lot, deeply, think about it. I like philosophy a lot. I like to understand how life actually works. I like to understand how decisions work. I like to understand how to communicate with the universe, if you will. Like when you make a decision, what is a really positive decision? What does it feel like? you know? All of those things is what I was always interested in deeply. I would read books about Zen Buddhism or Sufism or philosophy just because I like to understand how deep thinkers think, and wanted to understand how really positive higher state life can be achieved, if you want to call that. And so if I was raised in the way that I prescribed, they would have seen it, and I would have been let to develop in my own way. And eventually, of course, they would have panicked. Like many parents, based on conventional education, would immediately panic. Oh my God, how's the kid going to make money? Like where's the craft? Where's this? And where's math? And all of that. But if I was allowed to go down that road, they would eventually realize that I absolutely love to make business deals. That's just another side of my personality. It all interplays together with me, and again, I'm just giving myself as an example because I feel like it's a safe example from the point of view that I understand myself the best. And so that exploration would have probably taken maybe 12 years, but ultimately they would have seen uh, that I'm absolutely safe in my own hands as long as I'm being treated with respect and kindness and love. So that I don't develop an ego of being somebody who's persecuted or pushed down. Because when a child starts to develop the ego that they are pushed down and persecuted and that they're not good enough, that's when the child breaks. That's when you need to then start shoving stuff down their head, if you will, to try to get them to function. You know what I mean? So the education system ruins children like that because it breaks them. You can't break the child. You can't break something and then be like, why doesn't this function well? Well, you broke it, you bought it. You know what I mean? So I mean, it is what it is, and until we have this general enlightenment in how kids are treated, we will always have small broken people in our society.
It's the schools where I grew up. I had a interesting person in a call recently, and he compared pictures of German schools to concentration camps and highlighted how it's the same architecture, not kindly the same, but it's almost the entire same. Even like the factory bells, the way it is
Yes.
set up. And I was so surprised to see this in regards to, and he explained a little bit the idea of like how the this kind of architecture for education grew up of the Prussian system, and which was like very military. We take a civilian, we break him down, we form him into an obedient soldier, and thus like
Hmm.
all the truly defined creative people become exiles. And it's
Yeah.
and there's a cost, I think, to being an exile, which is you become strange and distrustful, and you build cool shit,
Mean,
but
right?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I taught in Baltimore inner city schools with my wife, and honestly, I was just shocked. It was just ridiculous. Like you come in, there's a school of like 5,000 little kids. There's not enough teachers. They're screaming at these little ones, like screaming at them, get back there. Da, 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 blah, blah. The kids are given nothing positive, no positive information, nothing about their individuality, because the teachers spend majority of their time basically yelling at the kids to make them coordinate like a little army, I guess. Really just felt like a prison. But even in Europe, living in Europe, I've seen many schools. I mean, most of the time they look like institutions. They look like some places where you house children. And so, when we have that kind of standard, what do we expect? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like innovation stagnates. The planet is in horrible state. Of course, because what are we teaching? And that nice as you mentioned, the German model would go back, marry a girl, and then spread all of his resentment and all of his anger onto his kids, and beat them down just as well while thinking that he's actually loving them, and he would propagate that quagmire of negativity for generations to come.
It's one of the things that I never realized that you just helped me understand was the correlation between love and responsibility. Like when I got kicked out from school, my father was so forced to play a more active hand in my education because the traditional system was done with me. So there was no curriculum anymore. And I have like a beautiful relationship with my father, and I still believe that one of the reasons for that is because if you help building something, you feel connected to it, and you have a deeper sense of meaning, as if you outsource some of the very opportunities that allow you to forge this soul thread to another person. And Germany is in a very weird state. Like we have been got into the habit right now of whenever we see a problem, we call the state to solve it. So we have these systems now to the education is broken, you go fix it. We give our elders to these elderly homes, or we see the deranged and the insanes in the streets, and we now like make these more rights, more rights, more rights, but it's never a focus on the individual to create solutions, and calling the nature of that particular individual of like, well, maybe this is how can we fix this? And have you seen something similar to where you are? Because I feel like this is one of the reasons why people don't love their countries anymore, where I'm from, because the threat of responsibility to where they've lived has been separated, and somebody else is taking care of that, and they don't love it. They are getting paid to do it, and I think you never do as much effort into something if you don't at least have like some stick in the game or something like this, or if it's your baby, or so to say.
Well, look, lack of wisdom is inherent in humanity, right? I think we both can agree with that. That if a human being has a chance to do something right or to do something in the wrong way, that they will usually 9 out of 10 times they will choose the wrong way. It's just historical fact, right? So, for example, in America, you've had historically the opposite, right? America is not a socialist system; it's a capitalist system, and the capitalist system has a lot of negative points to it. For example, being poor in America is a horrendous experience. You just it's terrible. You can't get good food. There's very little social security. It's not like in Germany or in the socialist country where if you are out of job, the state legitimately takes care of you, until you can get on your feet. You don't have that in America because the social net is so thin that the points where they take care of you are, you still live absolutely in poverty. And so, you know, in the people in America, for example, right now, have decided to try to elect in many states people who are like deeply socialist or even communist. And I can say that they're communist because I live in a communist state, so I know what that's like. I have a right to do so. Um, and they want that because they're tired of the old system. Either they're tired of the fact that they're constantly scared that what happens if they lose all their money and nobody will take care of me, which is understandable, or they don't have the wherewithal to run the government anymore. The country is so tired, so beat up post COVID that they don't have it anymore, and so they need to outsource it to somebody to take care of it. But the problem is that it's almost like taking a problem and going the opposite direction into a problem, right? So an intelligent solution would be to go to your political representatives and demand certain protections, like an increase in the social security structure, better treatment of the poor, the things that are not reasonable, but that feel good. You want to go to your politicians, demand that they improve the system, and then also improve it together. That's the positive resolution. But instead, people go the opposite way and they go, no, let's just get somebody who is basically a deep socialist communist and completely change the system so that even what was good about the country is no longer there. So what I think you're talking about is similar than of what I'm thinking is that when people come to a new country and they see problems, instead of proactively changing those problems into solutions, they want somebody else to fix those problems for them. And they hate the idea that the problem is there to such an extent that they don't want to even be in the vicinity of that problem to fix it because they don't have an internal mechanism through which to do it. And again, this goes back to the earlier discussion of how schools break kids. If you teach a person that they have no right for personal choices and for positive emotions early on, that everything that any pleasure that they derive in life and satisfaction comes from a teacher who approves of them or a parent who approves of them for a grade, and that all
Yeah.
information will be given to them from above, how do we expect then these same people to go into real life and be problem solvers? How do we expect them to be reasonable and try and make positive choices? Of course, they look at a problem and they go, "Where's my teacher? Where's the big guy? Where's the big guy who will solve this for me?" Well, the big guy is the government. So of course they basically go to the government and say, "Hey, government, country sucks. There's like this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. I can't deal with it. You deal it with it for me."
In
And I think we're
psychological
seeing that in all the countries.
terms, we call this an uh, Oedipal disorder. It's like when, like, one of my favorite quotes from Sigmund Freud is, "No man is a man until his father has died," and I think he meant this in a in a metaphorical sense, where if you are worshiping another man to play this god figure for you, you're still a child technically. And in some ways, I believe, like, currently the state is playing the role of the father figure, and thus you have an entire civilization of infants, to some degree, in a way. And
Yeah, and on what Sigmund described is the system that I described as well. If your father makes you worship him instead of allowing you to be a well-developed person, then yeah, you you're going to be like him, and you're probably going to need him to croak before you feel like you can make your own decisions. It's again the same thing. It's all the same thing.
it I never thought made this connection. It's like, I'm reading a lot of the old religious texts at the moment, and they make a big emphasis to don't worship idols. And I think with idols they mean anything else but like a divine source of knowledge. And I think, like, one of the things that you just mentioned is, like, if I have to ask my teacher for my career choices, and he does not ask the question that you pose to your children, which is like, what is your nature calling for you to do? You're teaching that child that they don't have a conscience, or like a creative core that needs to be consulted in order to discover what they should do with their life, or maybe what life is expecting out of them. And thus they're completely robbed of the opportunity to have their own story. It's crazy, actually, if you think about that we have this at scale. What do you feel like was the beginning of your awakening of your conscience or personal sovereignty for yourself?
I was very unhappy playing the violin and with my personal choice. I felt that my parents pushed me, and I also was extremely unhappy in the American public school system. And I wasn't happy with it. I needed something else, and the experience was very, very hard for me. And eventually I started to seek the light, if you want to call it. I started to seek my own happiness. I tried to make myself happy. That's all. I tried to find a way to not be so upset every moment of my life. I did not want to be the way that I was. And in doing so, I started looking for answers, anywhere where I could find them. I'm a reader, I'm a nerd, so I started to read, religious texts, everything from Zen, like I told you before, Zen Buddhism, um, self-help books by Eckhart Tolle, which I really liked, which was, funnily enough, I was introduced to by the Eastman School of Music professor. She had a class about how to audition for orchestras, and auditioning for orchestras is a very difficult thing. Very few people get selected. And she realized that there's an emotional toll that happens when you fail an audition. So her solution was to share with us Eckhart Tolle, because she felt like he dealt with how to be happy the best. And so we spent, in essence, having this self-help class, along with the audition class, and that really influenced me a lot. um, and there were many other things like Rumi. I read Rumi's, Sufism, tried to read the Hindu texts, anything that felt like it had some wisdom. I tried to really get it. I stayed away from European philosophers largely because I didn't feel like they actually reached the depth, which is funny enough. So I went east, and I was always attracted to the Eastern philosophies, to be honest with you. Um, but Eckhart obviously is German, but he's kind of New Age. So yeah, I did that. Then I started trying to understand, was I happy with my career? Then I married my wife, and my wife is a very, very deep person, probably deeper than I am, and had gone through the same thing. And the interaction that I had with her helped me tremendously to make correct, right choices. Because I said, she's just a wiser person than I am, and she let go of a lot of anger in her life, and so that this interaction eventually fostered me coming out of a lot of my anger and desperation and kind of fear-based responses. And then that's basically how I kind of started to unwind, and I'm still unwinding, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things internally that I work on, that I'm currently working to kind of still make decisions that are healthy. But yeah, I mean, I would say it started with my own I don't know, self-learning journey, if you want to call it, and it continued with me marrying a person that shared my experiences, my thoughts in many ways. And then, it just continued with me trying to be a good person. Being a father helped, a lot, because I observed where my negativity was affecting the kids. And I care enough about my kids that I don't want them to be affected by my negativity. So I just try to figure out how can I be better at this. And so I would say being a father has been probably the most challenging thing in my life. By far more by far more challenging than anything in my career. And so that helped tremendously. Also, things like I'm a dog dad. I love dogs. Same thing. Dogs are so easy to abuse. They can't talk back, you know? And so every all of these life experiences that are enriching and terrifying in many ways, because again, you come into fatherhood. I came into fatherhood with my own problems. I was not by any means, an attainer of nirvana when I came in. So, that's what makes it so horrifying and terrifying. But at the end of the day, it's a price you pay to become better. You can't always be in your comfort zone if you're trying to solve problems. So,
You would go back to one of my favorite quotes is I think it's Alexander Solzhenitsyn who said, like, one person who can say no can bring down a tyranny. And there's something about the spirit of defiance that I feel is, I call this the Alexandrian spirit, like, which I'm in love with for human beings. What was the moment where for you you decided this career that somebody else has picked for you, you wanted to break out of it? Because I'm like very fascinated by people who make like this invisible stance on something. Any moment that comes to your mind, and what you feel we can learn, because it's like I'm also my, it's like in old stories often God appears in the form of children. I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom we can learn from children. Any version or iteration of you where you made that decision, where a question you ask yourself, or this decision you made that led to you having a hand in your own education and making your own luck, so to say.
Well, I was always secretly educating myself because I can't help myself. I'm a very curious person. I was always reading books and stuff like that and thinking. Um, but I would say there was one moment. It was not a moment that was a specific in time. It was more like a period of like a year or two where I slowly wrapped my head around the reality, right? What was the reality? When I had arrived finally in my middle 20s, I had attained some success. I was given a Stradivari violin by my college, recorded on it, competed in a professional competition, played in Carnegie Hall, and I had learned and largely taught myself how to play in a way on the violin which didn't hurt me. I learned how to play light. The backstory there is I had very bad tendonitis injuries in my early 20s because I overpracticed, overstressed, overcommitted, if you will, and I just was playing the wrong way. And so I hurt myself with the instrument, and I it took me a year to recover, and it was an experience where I first realized that maybe maybe this is not a given that I will always be able to do this. But the end result of that experience was eventually I figured out how to play very, very well. I truly improved. And this was not a direct result of any teaching from any teacher. I did it myself. I was exploring how brilliant masters play. I saw how their hands move. And I remember these statements by them. They were saying how they play in their head, that the pattern of playing isn't achieved uh, by physical exertion, it's achieved in your mind. And I realized that when you over practice and you push into the instrument, you hurt yourself because the instrument isn't meant to be pushed into. And so one day in a practice room, I I was in pain again. My hands were giving out, and I closed my eyes and I tried to truly think. And I was like, I know I can do this. Like this is not outside the realm of what I can do. I just imagined how my hands would move with the right feeling where they weren't hurt, with that lightness. And so, I put it all together. And by the time that I was done, it was a 10-minute, like 5 to 10 minute experience. I could play. And I could, and it was never a situation where was never able to play well again. So that experience gave me perspective, in terms of that if you go outside of these walls, right? These walls, you must work hard to achieve success. If you go outside of the dogma, you can achieve success in your own way, in a smart way, in a way that is in line with your nature. But being able to play on the violin is not enough. You also have a career of violin. And the commercial prospects of being a musician were very miserable. Let me be completely honest. Like, so you have a way to go into orchestra playing, but in order to play in an orchestra, you have to play in a very kind of gray way. Like you can't stand out because the whole point of orchestra is you have to play in a section. And the other part of it is that the whole committee of the orchestra musicians that pick you, they have to like you. I am an individualist. I have never ever been a person who wanted to care if people like me or not. I'm not that type of person. I'm not wired that way. I can't do it. And so in an audition, inevitably my sound would stand out too much. I would never play nice with the orchestra members, and I would never get the role. It's a very simple thing. You have to support yourself. At the same time, you have the soloist track in the violin, but you have to either be a prodigy and basically let yourself be used, or you have to make nice with the presenters. And always the big downside of all of it is that you're traveling so much, you're working so much, it's very difficult to have a normal family. Who is going to stick with you while you're traveling in different cities, doing these different gigs? And how are your kids going to be not seeing their father? If you choose to have kids. And so at some point, I came to this realization. I'm like, listen, I will never be able to have a family this way. And I'm struggling to get even the most basic jobs because I am not fit. I don't fit the jobs. Like I can't fit into them. Square into a circle, right? Doesn't work. So so yeah, that happened when I was around 25, 26. I spent my or no, I wasn't like probably 25. I spent 20 my being 25 years old being upset about it basically. I was just upset, distraught, in a depression, going to auditions, failing the auditions, not like just an absolute mess. And it took me around 9 months to recover from the blow that music really wasn't my career. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like practicing, and I don't like any options there. And the real problem for me was that I hated the idea that I would have to make my own decision independently, own it, and feel good about it. That was the most difficult part. It wasn't really leaving the violin. It was the fact that I was leaving habit and what I was used to, because what I was used to was felt so comfortable and safe. So, well, not comfortable. I was definitely not comfortable, but it felt kind of safe in a prison type of way, if you will.
If you would have him like, it's very interesting to see like how different events seem to be interconnected with each other on an individual and a societal level. When you were in that orchestra and you were edging in as a circle into a square, battling their demands for uniformity and your own individualism, and you were suffering financially from it, and you would travel back in time to somebody who's going through a similar experience, and you put your hand on their shoulder, what would you choose to tell them in those situations?
I would probably tell them that they should take some time off and try to think about what makes them happy. Take a break, take a step back, and in that space, try to do things that make them happy. And once they've done it, if they can connect what makes them happy to what they're doing, go back to it. And if you can't, think of other things that you can do to make yourself happy. Because at the end of the day, it's all about making positive decisions for yourself, owning that you made them, that didn't happen to you, that you made them, and being positive about that decision. You make a positive decision, something good happens to you, you get positive emotion, then you have to give the positive emotion back to the universe, because there's a saying, where there's gratitude there's grace. There has to be an interplay. You give and you receive. You have to be able to enjoy and give positivity back, but in order to get positivity, you have to ask. It's a whole thing. It's like a soul thing. And yeah, and so that's what I would tell him. I would tell him, slow down. Billy Joel has the song "Vienna Waits for You." The words start, slow down, you crazy child. You're so ambitious for a juvenile. Those are the beginning words. But it's true. Slow down, feel what makes you happy, try to get to it, make the decisions off of that, enjoy the decisions, and then if you feel that what you're doing is making you happy, go back to it with those emotions. But if you feel like it's not, do something else, do something else and make yourself happy.
do you feel that, for me, I'm always surprised how sometimes the earliest stages of our life set us up to for our big contributions later. Do you feel that your interest in projects that were, for instance, in crypto, which was based on the idea of individual sovereignty and autonomy, were fueled by creating a mirror world that was very rich in something that you were deprived of in the earliest chapter of your life?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I had a problem with money when I was younger. I had a problem with making money and keeping money and everything. And crypto was wonderful because it allowed me to play with money. Because crypto is nothing but playing with money. You take a picture of a dog, you put it into a smart contract or a contract address, and you call it a coin, and you get Dogecoin. And now the Dogecoin has its own ETF that's traded on Wall Street. It's a financial asset. It's a toy. All of DeFi is a toy. You're playing with money. You're making it less stringent. You're making it more democratic, if you will. Instead of only banks being able to print money, you have companies that can create stablecoins. And in essence, they're making money, basically. They're just creating money. Even if they peg it to the dollar is there to basically mm, make it legitimate. But in reality, it's them who's making money. But of course, because the dollar makes it legitimate, and it also strengthens the dollar right back. And
If
so,
you, oh, sorry, continue, please.
yeah. And so, like the reason crypto worked for me is because I got to play with money. I got to stop thinking that money is serious. Money is serious business. Wear a suit and no, like just make money, play with it, have fun with it, and then you'll make it. And that's what crypto did for me. And that's why there was a definite fit.
Very interesting, the connection between creating a foundation where you can play and mastery. Like for me, I'm a former basketball player, and on a professional level, but in Germany it's a very small market, and I made a pivot there. Thank God for that. But like in the beginning, people just we didn't have a referee enforcing the rules or people keeping track of. It was more like getting the kids first to touch the ball, feel the field, and spend some time on it. And one of the things that I found very difficult, and I had a challenging relationship with money, was that my first interaction with it were so negative and came very late. Where so my question for you also is very imbued by the myth of Satoshi Nakamoto. What does this story mean to you, and do you know who he is? And afterwards, I would love to get some advice on you how you learn to master money.
Well, I don't believe that Satoshi was real. I believe that there was a group of developers that developed this technology. If you look historically, there were forerunners of Bitcoin in the United States that were created, and I wrote an article about that in Substack. And also, I once met, and again, I'm not going to go deep into this, but I once met a guy in the industry who basically told me that he knows one of the main developers of Bitcoin, one of the Satoshi Nakamoto. And so that makes me have a very big doubt about, that there was this mythical Japanese figure and he just simply disappeared. I don't think I think it's childish, honestly, but um not to look down on anybody who believes it. I just don't I because if you look at the Bitcoin system also, it's way too complicated. You have nodes, you have to the servers, you have to set everything up. One person really, you know what I mean? Like it's hard. It's a very hard sell. What does Satoshi mean to me? Um, well, I think that whoever made Bitcoin was aiming for probably two or three things. The first one was, let's introduce the concept of digital currency into the world. Now, that's number one. Number two, let's introduce the concept of decentralization, meaning it's not controlled by banks or central entities. It's controlled by various computers spread around the world with people who take care of those computers. right? And three, let's introduce the idea of like instant cash, something that can be that anybody can use in a more or less comfortable way. So to me, that's an innovation, and it's an innovation that has greatly improved the financial system, which frankly was in a largely in a state of collapse, in my opinion, even if a very slow collapse. So, to me, it means that there's innovation left in the world, that there's people who are willing to introduce it for whatever purpose, but it's introduced, and that's great. It means that I love innovation, and where there is innovation, that's where I personally thrive. I love new technology. So for me, that's like exactly the god, kind of like the godsend that I look for, if you will.
Well, I have plenty of ideas about that, so maybe we can have a follow-up
Yeah.
conversation on how to do this. And money for me was challenging, and it's like, and for me, my resistance to authority also came from my father. I told you he was a child soldier and came to Germany as a spy to raise money for a party there. Met my mother, fell in love with my mother, and didn't want to have anything to do with that anymore. In consequence, lived in the underground even to this day. So one of the things that I saw was bank account being seized and no longer having access to them,
Yep.
and see what this did to my father. What do you make of this new trend that this industry seems to be now highly regulated? Because what I liked about it is the inability of other people to take things from you and to travel with portable wealth, because it made me feel like, oh, like it feels like these people can't just take stuff anymore. But now it's like I made an account on Binance. I have to give them my ID, and everything is gonna feels it's just gonna become another currency in a way. Do you think the
So first
idea
of all,
of having autonomy and the financial complete is illusionary, or do you think we can build something like that?
I love the story of your dad, because I feel like you basically throw out there that your dad is James Bond, and then you go back to the question. It's very impressive.
No, he's not James Bond, where James Bond works for the government and is backed by it. He's hunted by it, so he's the opposite. He's like
Right.
he's like the David who says, I don't want to play the violin anymore. I would like to make my own happiness. He's
Right.
much more like leave me the fuck alone kind of guy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, look, not everybody likes James Bond either, so I guess,
I think he's
there's a
cool.
lot
I
more
think
commonality there.
I think he's
But
cool.
look, in terms of the money becoming more regulated, yeah, I mean, when Wall Street enters the fray, and when regulators enter the fray, yeah, it's going to become regulated, because you're dealing with people who live in that world. That's their world. In the EU, it's a very difficult situation, because, in my opinion, the EU government largely is against crypto for the very reasons that you mentioned, because it's sovereignty, autonomy, and stuff like that. And I think that the policy in the EU has always been a bank digital currency. That's all it is. They want a digital euro, because you can centralize it, because you don't have to use a public blockchain to run it on, where everybody would see the transactions, and then you can have even more control, you know. And so when you're dealing with that type of agenda, it doesn't matter that they passed MiCA. MiCA is very, very suppressive of cryptocurrency and innovation. But when you pass that type of law, and you have that type of an agenda, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, it's just it's inevitable, and I think that it comes down to the people in Europe of whether they want it that way. But the problem is that the majority of people don't even really know what crypto is about. I think there's only like 7% of the world population that owns crypto, you know? So, from that perspective, there's not enough people that even know what crypto does. They don't know that you can carry the money with you, store it anywhere, send it independently, hold it independently. With that said, even the old school crypto isn't really immune from censorship. You can freeze an account, you can freeze a USDT account, you can freeze a USDC account, you can track all transactions. All crypto, especially Bitcoin, is ridiculously public. Like there's no privacy. The privacy was not built in, and so you see that this is why when people say, "Well, crypto can be used for money launderers," that's not really true because Bitcoin has no privacy built into it. Neither does USDC, neither does USDT. Now, if you use Monero, which is a privacy coin, yes, but that's not necessarily all of crypto. That's a coin that you can literally regulate. So, so yeah, I think that the crypto is becoming much more stringent. But that said, I do think that especially in the United States, because the regulation has largely been favorable to crypto, that there are still people that value privacy and independence, and so I think that in the states, due to their legislation and their choices, that crypto will largely probably survive at least partially the way it was, where it's allows you some semblance of sovereignty. In Asia, I think it will also be the same, most likely in India, in Africa, Middle East. But I think in Europe there's a problem again because of the stance, because the agenda has always been a bank digital currency, and that agenda has never really changed.
One of the things I'm interested in is also what would be a Platonic invention that would guarantee individual sovereignty for the future. I have this crazy friend who believes that he has very controversial opinions, and he believes that the invention of the nuclear bomb is something that will lead to humanity overcoming war as a concept. Obviously, this has not happened, but his idea was that. One moment, let me shut down my WhatsApp. Let me re-ask this question. So I have this crazy friend who believes that the invention of the nuclear bomb will lead to the end of wars eventually, just because we can't escalate these things anymore. What do you feel? Obviously, I don't agree with this, but what do you think would be a Platonic ideal of an invention that would make individual sovereignty irreversible? Something that we would beat totalitarians? Or
I
is this
mean,
a constant back and
honestly,
forth?
honestly, that idea that nuclear bombs are like the peace inventions. It's like saying, I don't know. It's hard to find a comparison, but it's almost like saying like a baseball bat is a really great way to play on the violin. You know what I mean? Like everybody will be so careful playing on the violin now because if you push the bat a little too low, it will break the whole.
Right.
But having said that, I think that the only way to have sovereignty is to have sovereignty from the inside, not to create something to try to have that happen on the outside. So, like you have to make internal decisions and understand if being sovereign makes you happy, and then enforce those decisions on the inside, then push that emotion on the outside, and that's how you create sovereignty. And for that to happen, the entirety of humanity has to be on board, all 8 billion people. and and so that's the only way to do it. That's where I think there's a fallacy in crypto when we establish DAOs and we say, well, it's trustless now, and it's like, humans are needed, but it's built for humans by humans. You can't cut out the actual reality of humanity from this product. And so that's why often DAOs don't work, because you can't pretend that human nature it's why communism failed. You can't pretend that human nature doesn't exist and be like, we're going to take away everything and it's all okay now. You will all be happy. Absolutely not. There will still be people who, with their cleverness, will find a way to have more than others, and the whole system will work. And so, again, I believe all changes have to happen from the inside. And if we're aiming for all of humanity to have those changes, then all of humanity needs to make that change. You know, if that makes sense.
You answered it I think the devil was in the details in regards to this answer. Expecting an outside invention to enforce justice onto the playing field rather than to creating more sovereign individuals from the inside out seems like an Oedipal thought all to begin with in a way, which is interesting. Okay, and one of the questions I have, like, how did you know a lot about money? How are you going to teach your your children about money? Like for me, like from if you would how are you going to do this? And for those people who are watching, I think you're also a visionary in regards to where money is going to evolve into. My follow-up question will be, what do you think is the future of money, so to say?
I teach my kids about money by having them basically be, kind of see what I'm doing with it and talk to them about it and talk a lot to them about internal decision making, owning the decisions, being positive about the decisions, and also making sure that they are aware that whatever they choose to do to make money, they have to feel fulfilled by it and be happy through it. It should never be a suppressant. It should never be a negative action. It should always be a positive action. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had my kids design logos for my companies. I've had my kids, uh, give me input about how to run my business, not because I didn't know how to do it, but because I felt like I'm dealing with sophisticated, mature people, and let's give them a chance. Because I mean, like they would be like the kitchen with me and my wife, or living room, and would be talking sometimes about business, and the kids would inevitably have something to say, and I'd be like, that's awesome. Let's let them, feel empowered to keep doing that. Not so that they run my business, but so they can develop an ego of I'm important, I know what I'm doing, I have been here before, and my opinions are valued, you know? And so that's where I feel like me and my wife have worked. And then of course the positive decision making is so important. So yeah, that was the first question. And there was a second question. I'm sorry, I forgot what it was.
Um, the future. What do you think is the future of money? Like one of the strange images while you were talking that I had in mind was, it seems to me that founders are getting younger and younger. And I think
True.
one of the reasons for that is it's during the midst of a industrial revolution. Anybody who's who's how do I put it? The iterational process of technology is so fast right now that even if you're 25 years old, you're almost old right now because it's you have a you grew up in a way where AI wasn't there, for instance, in a way, and so it's like maybe in the future will be like Ender's Game, where children are going to do a lot of the inventive work, and the work cycle is going to go a little bit down. What do you foresee for the future of money, and what are your fears and what are your hopes in regards to this?
First of all, glad you mentioned Ender's Game. I love Orson Scott Card. I read a lot of his work. But beyond that, future of money. Well, like I said, I think in Europe, it's the agenda is to create a digital currency for the banks. I don't see enough pushback in Europe to this to think that it won't happen. Where I do see pushback is from the United States, where the current administration absolutely does not want a central bank digital currency. And this is where America is diverging heavily from Europe. And so in these 4 years of the Trump administration, they're going to very heavily favor private owned digital currency development. What happens after Trump, we don't know. Depends on who comes into the office. Because if an opposition comes into the office, they will absolutely go central bank digital currency, 100%. Um,
Can we stop here for a second? I would like to unpack this with you because this seems to be very important. It's one of the things that I hate is if a government tries to impose their will on me and my family. It's like through
mhm.
my history, I don't like this. What would a centralized digital currency mean for individual citizens?
It would mean total lack of control over the money, basically. Money stops being private enterprise and becomes a state enterprise. It's basically communism, completely. Um, so basically, the all the money is digital. There's no cash. All cash transactions are outlawed. Um, there's no way to safely store money in your own private way. Government sees everything that you have, and therefore there's ramifications to that. So if you say something that they don't like, they will freeze your bank account and all of your money. If work in the wrong field, your money is frozen. And I do think that the point of it is to eventually have that everywhere. I mean, that was the initial point of this whole thing. I don't think that it's working, and I think that there are several reasons why it's not working. First of all, there's opposition from several different places, namely the United States, and the right in the United States deeply opposes this. That's why you now see legislation in the United States like the Genius Act and all the different crypto legalizations, which are legalizing privately owned crypto and allowing not just banks to have their own currency, but companies to issue their own currency tethered to the dollar and stuff like that. So that's part of it. The other part of it is hackers. Hackers are an interesting thing because if you have one world currency or one euro currency, and some smart person decides to hack that currency, you have an absolute nightmare because there's only one currency. You know what I mean? The person's now manipulating the entire financial system, and I'm not sure that there's technology yet to make sure that that does not happen. I think that there's a lot of opposition from hackers, and that issue has not been solved, and so yeah, I mean, so there's opposition there. There's some countries like Dubai where they're testing central bank digital currencies maybe for like internal transactions, and then uh, privately owned stable coins and other stuff for private sector. So there are countries that are kind of being nimble about this, and they're testing both. And there's Singapore, which also is an interesting system. But basically, yeah, I mean, it's. I think the future will depend on who's in essence who is in power and the amount of pushback that the people of those jurisdictions have towards what a central bank digital currency is. Um,
Let me interrupt
so
you
yeah,
here. So central digital currency is a form of coin communism right now, right?
it's a form of what? Sorry?
Coin communism, pretty much in a way, where the power will be well, they can because people don't seem to know that, and in the United States, for instance, who's for this and who's against this? Because here in Germany, Germany is very. I'm in Berlin right now, and it's kind of crazy. You Germany's the leftist hub, and you go to the streets and you still see the statues of Stalin and Marx and Lenin. There's quotes engraved into the ground. So the ghosts of the communist empire is very much still haunting the city, even though, like for instance, it's actually not that far away. And I think sometimes it's really important to translate the terms they use to hide ideological interventions and translate them for what they are.
Yeah, I mean, look, I say that it's communism because as a person who lived under there, like you can't really have an ownership of money under communism, and you can't really have ownership of money under a regime that has like a central bank digital currency. You just can't. Because how do you have it? You have a bank that owns all of the money, prints it at will, and stops a person from having or using money at any point. So the person, in essence, does not own money. The person is I don't know, borrows money, really, in a way. You just kind of have a state-run currency, and you can use it as long as you don't say something wrong, or you don't work in the wrong sector or something like that. And that's by nature, that's communism. That's what communism is. You know, like, for example, under communism in Moscow and in Soviet Union, you had a great author, Bulgakov, right? And at one point, his plays, he wrote Master and Margarita, and that really was like, in my opinion, was like almost like the Mozart of Soviet literature. And and at some point, he wrote some stuff that the authorities didn't like, because he wrote a lot about the White Russians, the oppositions to the communists, because he was himself a White Russian. And he wrote about it. He didn't mean to offend anybody. He was just writing these characters in. But at some point, he pissed off the union of authors. I forgot what it was called, the central body that basically said, this is okay and this is not okay. And at some point, he also pissed off Stalin. Even though Stalin liked his work, but at some point he pissed him off. All of a sudden, all of his plays are no longer played in all of the theaters. Nobody will hire him. His career is dead, basically. Well, apply the same concept to money. All of a sudden, your money doesn't work. You can't get a bank account, and anything associated with your name cannot be monetized. That's basically what a central bank digital currency is. So in essence, it is basic communism.
Who and one of the things is in the American movement right now, because like Europe is very much a ripple effect, it seems to me, with what's happening over there, on the some degree, probably not. Who's for this centralized? By the way, the word centralized is not a good word. It's like
No, no.
in historical context. For me, for instance, if you and I go back about the conversation we had today, how we had an argument about like you should call an individual for their nature, what their contribution be to the world. The communist state, they will tell you what to do, right? And it's like, for me, if you tell me what my profession should be, that's a form of slavery, actually. It's like, for me, you tell a slave what his duty is, and I have the moral authority to tell you how you're living your life. And that's like something I'm deeply opposed to. So there's something about the word centralized, which means very few individuals are going to have the power over this, right? Or am I mistaking this?
Central bank implies that the power of the currency lies in the central banking system. By definition, it means that nobody else has control over it. So it's really the central bank system. The opposite view is private crypto, where you have stable coins, which are tethered to the dollar or any national currency. And at that point, any company that has the reserves of the equivalency of the stable coins that they mint can create their own stable coins, their own money, in essence, as long as that money is in line with the national interest and doesn't counter national interest. So, for example, in a crypto vision of the world and a Web3 vision, Circle, which is a private company, buys up U.S. government treasuries, stores their cash, let's say, somewhere, or I think a lot of their holdings is actually managed by BlackRock. But anyway, they have the reserves, and they create USDC, which is a stablecoin. It's much less centralized. It's still centralized because Circle controls it, and Circle reserves are controlled by BlackRock, and Circle, some of Circle's wealth are in U.S. treasuries, but it's a separate company that creates this currency, right? And the same thing is happening, let's say, I'll give you a very good example. Like the Trump organization created their own stablecoin, if you can believe it, called USD1. They control it. It's the Trump company, Trump organization that controls that stablecoin. Now, do they have to have reserves for that stablecoin? 100%. Are they accountable? Do they have to show proof of whatever in reserves and all other stuff? Yes. But it's a private company that issued this, and therefore it's more decentralized because now you have Circle issuing a stablecoin, you have Trump organization issuing a stablecoin, you have Tether, the parent company of USDT, issuing a stablecoin. All of these stablecoins are backed, they're safe, and they create competition. And so, in a society where you have competition, you have decentralization, and that's where you will be told much less what to do. Because when one central entity controls everything, that's how you get a communist state or totalitarian state. That's what happens.
The name of this podcast is Alexandrians Were Dying, and the name of my company also. It's very much inspired by the Alexandrian Library burned to the ground, but also for me, a book that is burning is symbolic because I'm in Berlin right now. Like on my way here, I took my bike past the very point where the National Socialists burned the books of some of the people we mentioned in this very podcast. Like Freud was also one of the, and so for me the idea of like freezing an account or taking your money away from you is a way to impose control on things. What is your take on Trump, and what are the two forces in regards to shaping the financial climate of the United States in regards to autonomy? Because it seems that something is going on here.
Well, I would say this. I mean, I'm going to only give my take based on what I think Trump did for crypto, because I think that's where I professionally work, and I can judge it firsthand, let's say. And I try not to discuss politics in general. I just think it's not a topic. But if we discuss Trump's effect on crypto, well, he essentially, and he alone, created, and his administration alone created the framework for legalized crypto in the United States. So that includes stablecoins, DeFi, are crypto tokens securities, not securities? What is legal? What is not legal? It was it was only because he came to power that all of that happened. For the last 4 years in the previous administration, we basically had nothing but lawsuits and suppression. Majority of people in crypto in the United States under the Biden administration were sued by the SEC. And there was no definition given of what is a security, what is not a security, why are they being sued. There was just this general statement, well, we're protecting consumers and you are bad, and therefore we will sue you. And that literally was the message. And so I think what is happening now with crypto and Trump is refreshing for somebody who works in crypto, because like, yeah, I mean, I would like to understand what I can do and what I can't do. Let the society define where the boundaries are, and then we'll follow that. But you can't tell people that you're not following the boundaries designed by society without setting the boundaries. I mean, I'm sorry, but again, that's basically like I don't know, like a totalitarian control state of some sort. That's literally like Kafka territory. So I mean, yeah, I think Trump has been very good for crypto. He staved off the CBDCs. How long they are staved off in the States will depend on what the American people choose. Because if they do choose the Democratic Party, 100% that we will have a CBDC. And the reason we know
What
it
does
is because
CBC mean? This mean?
central bank digital currency. Yeah.
Let's pause for 1 second. The Democrats not even sure that's this particular group of people wants to induce a centralized banking system, which is basically coin communism.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know that because look, they again, I don't want to delve into into politics, but like recently you had a mayor of New York chosen, the new guy, right? Who's basically whose statement is that he's going to make sure the buses are free and there's state-run stores with food. Okay, I lived in Soviet Union. You only have state-run stores in a communist country. It's impossible. You can't have state-run stores even in a socialist country. It doesn't work that way. So if these are the trends, if these are the thought patterns of these people, then yeah, of course they're going to have a central bank digital currency so they can nationalize or internationalize the money, concentrate the power to create a system where basically there's total dependency on a centralized body that provides you food, that tells you what to do, that okays every action that you do. Yes, that is communism in essence.
We spoke also about the one of the things that is why communism I don't like from a psychological perspective is one of the psychological parameters of evil from my point of view is if robbing an individual of their power and making them addicted or dependent upon you. There's like two human stories: the Oedipal myth, which is the infant that never leaves the house and is like lives, so say, under the chains of their Oedipal mother or father. And there's the hero myth, the autonomous individual who pioneers into the world and has adventures and comes back with stories. And I think, like, does it worry you to the degree with that the development seems to be that the United States like are going into this direction? And then I want to cut off this politics topic, but I didn't know these kind of things, so for me this is new.
Look, the way I look at evil is the following. Evil is decision making that leads to unhappiness. When you choose things that make you unhappy, that is evil by definition, and that is sin. And so, can we say that the current direction in New York is evil? Well, I mean, if it makes the people of New York unhappy, which seems like a lot of New Yorkers are unhappy, then I guess it is. I'm not going to put a judgment like that on that. You know what I mean? Well, what I will say is that it's hard to imagine people that like control over their lives be happy necessarily in the system that is being proposed, let's say. And we can also probably say that the majority of the country does not agree with it because somebody like Trump was elected. Because if because if the majority of the country wanted a largely communist state or a largely socialist state, then Trump is probably the wrong person for that. So we can probably say that what is happening in New York does not correlate well with the rest of the country, that there seems to be a lot of people in New York that are not happy with what's happening, and therefore it potentially is not the right decision. That said, I firmly believe that the government that is in power is always the reflection of the people. It's never, it's never, even if it's a totalitarian government, even if it's a full dictatorship, even if it's a full kingship where a king controls everything, the people decide the power structure, the control structure. It's the people. If you have a communist at the center of the government, it's because the people have decided that that's what they want. And so, therefore, the idea that I just want to make sure that we take out the victimization out of this conversation. There's no victimization here. People decide who they want, who is in power, and they're the ones that decide to let them stay to a large extent. So, you know, I don't know. Does that answer some of you what you were asking?
Very much so, and I think like New York has a choice. It's like, do you want to, like, I believe it's a dialectic between like the leader being an indicator for what the bottom is hoping to hear, but there's also a seducing element, I think, where if you're in trouble and somebody helps you to point your finger towards why your life the way it is the way, and he points away, then you're also you're being enchanted with a story. It's pretty much the idea of like you can stay in it's the magic choice, right? It's like you can stay plugged
Yeah,
into the matrix, or you can where things are
yeah.
comfortable, but then you're gonna stay a slave pretty much, or a battery for this particular system.
Look, we're approaching the concept of manipulation and manipulating other people. Manipulation, of course, exists, but in my opinion, the person being manipulated usually approves of the manipulation, like a lot of times. And if you don't believe that, then you take away the self-sovereignty from the equation at the root. Do you know what I mean? We can't here sit and talk about self-sovereignty and say how world should be self-sovereign if we believe in victimization. Because victimization, by its nature, assumes that a person does not have control. So it's one of those things that like it's a chicken and an egg. So I look, I believe that life is composed of choices and choices that you make, and the only guiding light is, does the choice make you happy or does the choice make you upset? And if you go by the fact that you are the one making the choices, you and only you, you then propagate self-sovereignty. And again, that will answer your question: how do we get to self-sovereignty?
Maybe this is maybe one of the only disagreements from our entire podcast. I think the question needs to be posed. Usually, personal sovereignty does not lead to immediate happiness. If I'm hiding, like from me point of view, like you making the decision to not play the violin anymore, I'm sure also came with going through a desert of reorientation, remastery, and giving up things that were stabilizing you in that particular environment. And for me, one of the things that I learned is like usually when you align with conscience and truth, usually the first thing that happens is your life is going to shit. So it's
Right.
like that's like just what I learned personally. So for me, it's like, is this meaningful or not? Like, and as in regards to, is this the right thing to do? Because if you elude this, then you can broaden the horizon from the feeling and see like, well, what is the long-term consequences of me not saying no in this particular circumstance? And if the long-term consequences is that my entire civilizational core is going to suffer, then it may be worth it to not be happy for a while. That's the only thing I would like to add. Anyway,
Yeah, look, I don't want to argue on that. I mean, I think again we're all influenced by our own life, and so yeah.
let's have the last part, and then we are done with it for today. The Alexandrian questionnaire, and then I will leave you off to your other very important um, duties for today. What's
Okay.
your favorite question, David?
What is my favorite question?
Yes,
Jeez. Uh, are you happy?
favorite word.
Yes. These are not easy questions, you know what I mean? I like words in general. Substance.
Least favorite word.
It's a curse. I'd rather not say it.
You can curse on this show. Don't worry about it.
I really, yeah. You know what? I hate curses towards gay people. I
Mm-hmm.
just find them absolutely
I
disgusting.
understand. I understand now. I understand. I think people also know. A quote you're trying to live by, Dave.
Jesus. Something like it doesn't matter where you start from. All that matters is where you end up.
If you could resurrect like three people from history to add to your personal board of advisors, who would you pick?
Rilke, the poet. Um, it would be number one. Number two, probably Da Vinci. Uh, and number three, somebody between either like some sort of a great female queen. I don't know. There's been a lot. Or a great female leader. I love you, Catherine the Great of Russia. I love the great queen that they had in Georgia. I forgot her name. Golda Meir in Israel, I admire to some extent. Uh, Great female. I think women have a special perspective. Anybody who is a female who achieved greatness is somebody that I would definitely want to understand.
The next 60 seconds would go viral by any chance, and only world leaders would tune in. What would be one thing you would like them to hear from you?
I I don't know.
um, Last question. One of the things that I'm interested in is graveyards for the nature of my project as we are trying to make that talk. They always have these epitaph, like a one-liner about their grave. Have you thought about what yours is going to be? And if so, or what would be like a sentence that you would like people to remember or see there?
Oy. Here lies David. He wasn't as annoying as we thought, and he was much better. I don't know. I'm sorry. I know I'm bombing this. It's very hard. It's like you're putting me on the spot, and I don't know what to say. Something that
That
has to do with me becoming a better person over life and that making an impact. I don't know how to put that in a sentence.
that's fine. This can be a draft for this. Last question. If that particular grave would be equipped with an avatar trained on your psyche, and a pilgrim finds it, and you can only play one message, so that would be stable even for people in hundreds of years would find this grave. What would be your time capsule, your message to that individual from the future?
Um, Jesus. Never try Swedish candy. They have the weirdest flavors. They put salt in their candy. So in case you find any calcified Swedish candy, whatever you do, don't put it in your mouth.
Good one, good one. And for those who listened, how can we support you in your endeavors, and where can we find you?
Yeah, you can go to David Dobrovitsky, it's one word, .substack.com for my articles. You can find me on LinkedIn if you Google me. My LinkedIn comes up. If you want to interact with me, message me. I'm pretty open there. I'm always open to collaborate professionally. I'm very much into writing. So, if you want to collaborate there, would love to connect. So I would say these are the best ways.
Thank you so much for making an appearance on the show. I'm looking forward to continue our conversation in the future. For everybody listened, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you learned as much as I did, and that you will put the learnings into behaviors. That's like for me a good sign that you're properly processing the wisdom contributions of the guests we're having. Thanks, everybody. See you in the next episode.